Hello, everyone, and welcome back. Today, I have Phil from the Ancient Alternative View, and we are going to sit down and have a little conversation about some news updates and go around the world and look at some different sites and photos from the catalog. Phil, how are you doing today?
I'm very well, thank you. What a pleasure it is to be here, Andrew, and talk about the phenomenon that you and I found together around the world and look at where it has taken us. Pretty much every researcher that you and I have taken with us along the way is now fascinated with the nub phenomenon. Now, what we're looking at here is the opposing nubs on the Mancuare pyramid. Firstly, I'd like to say, Andrew, I don't know whether you agree, I know you do, to be fair, is there's no way these can be for lifting. We've pointed this out a few times. Why would the blocks underneath not have similar configurations, mate?
I agree. Yeah, you can see that you have one on the top and one on the bottom, and if it's a lifting configuration, you really only need it for the bottom. And then the one next to it with four, there's really no need for all four of those. And then we see others in the wall that have three and just singular nubs. So obviously there's way too much variation going on here for it to just be one standardized technique.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, if you look as well at the different nub configurations that you and I have found around the world, above the door at the Mancuare pyramid, we find, well, pretty much an exclusive set of nubs. And it shows a times three configuration. Now, I know you and I have spoken of this before, and it isn't just in one area now, is it?
Mm-hmm.
We've found the times three configuration that's above that door in South America.
Mm-hmm.
We've found that multiple different areas. Now, if these nubs were for lifting, Andrew, why would you find them on the base stones that we're looking at the Mancuare pyramid there? They just simply wouldn't be there on the base. They wouldn't. You wouldn't have them for lifting, would you? Now, to me, they're the same mineralogy as well.
Mm-hmm.
It has to be the same mineralogy. There is no sandbag there, no wood.
No.
Even when you look at middles where it's blown out slightly, it shows the same mineralogy. What do you think?
Right. It looks kind of like the surface sloughing on some of the other blocks. There's a clear grain texture underneath the surface, but it is not concentric rings of petrified wood. It's the same mineral composition as the stones themselves. And, some are broken. You can see the inside. Some are still intact. But in both configurations, I'm not seeing wood.
I agree. And if you think about it as well, that entire pyramid would have been covered in those stones.
I agree.
Yes, they've been taken away, and we're only seeing maybe a third of the pyramid's worth above the door of them.
Mm-hmm.
But it would have been covered. If this was a language, it would have been plastered over the Mancuare pyramid.
Agreed.
I find that fascinating, Andrew.
And what's even more is that, what Ben at Uncharted X showed us, this is the Khafre pyramid, the middle pyramid, and on its base there are nubs. So yes, there are smooth casing stones on the upper portions, but there are also nubbed casing stones on the bottom. So what does that say? That says that whatever language or whatever messages were on the Mancuare could have also been on Khafre, and then you extrapolate also on the Khufu pyramid. And there are historical accounts of hieroglyphics on the Khufu pyramid. So what does that say?
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree. Well, there's a specific nub set that you and I look at, and it's a variation of nub that I find interesting, Andrew. You get circular nubs, half moon nubs, and why don't they appear on every single block if they were for lifting? I'd like to say to, well, your audience and mine straight away that you and I profess, but to everyone that's listening, there's no way they can be for lifting when they're on the base. That's impossible.
No,
There's no way. No way.
And you can see right here at Khafre, you have smooth above and then the nubbed below. And then if you zoom out, you'll see it interspersed. There are smooth and nubbed next to each other. So, not every block needed the nubs, but for some reason, some of them did.
Yeah, absolutely agree. If we as well think that the Mancuare pyramid is not the only nubs that we've seen in Egypt, I'd like to take everybody to the Great Pyramid and show them the internal workings of the portcullis. And I've discussed this with you many times over the years, Andrew, and if you could look at the schematic for argument's sake before you look at the actual nub itself, it's a working part of the Great Pyramid. It proves functionality of the Great Pyramid. Now, you and I have looked at photos as well that show the Great Pyramid. We're lucky to have had photos from Larry over his pyramid channel. And it shows it perfectly, Andrew. Now, why would you have that nub in the working of the portcullis chamber in the Great Pyramid if the nubs weren't significant to the engineers that made the pyramids themselves?
Right. It's at the very core. It's not just something that was done by later peoples putting extra casing stones on the pyramid. No, this is at the very core of the construction. So whoever it was, they were working with nubs at the beginning.
Well, you and I have heard a lot of people say that the casing stones maybe have added later to protect the internal workings of what was an earlier civilization's work. Well, I disagree with that because the portcullis nub actually proves that wrong. And anybody that says to us that the initial nub engineers were not in the making of the pyramids can be proved wrong by the portcullis nub. Now, with Ben at Uncharted X and Jimmy at Bright Insight, they've had some fantastic photos of what we're looking at here. You and I found these many moons ago. Look at the mineralogy. And it's almost like a bevel block, nubbed block that we're looking at here.
Agreed.
Now, why would that be placed here, Andrew? Alongside, we've heard also Matt, Ancient Architects, talk about the soft limestone that you get at the Sphinx enclosure and so on. Why would these be here, Andrew?
Right. It's like, and like other people have noticed, it's like they're socketed into the softer limestone, like they've been fitted into either an already eroded structure, maybe as a way to shore it up and to restore it, or this was the original configuration and they wanted some kind of harder lining on the inside of this avenue. It's on both sides, and maybe there was more of it in the past, so maybe there, like Ziggy Dan talks about, maybe it was a waterproofing of some kind.
That's an excellent point. I think the waterproofing idea that Ziggy has is fantastic. And if you look at the bottom of that block and zoom in slightly, they are almost like nubbed bevel blocks, and we've seen many sites, you and I, that have nubbed bevel blocks, one of them being Bolevi Mausoleum, which is in Turkey. And I know it's one of your favourite sites. It's also one of mine. And what's written about this site is certainly not what it was. I know that you and I have studied it lots and lots. And the base stone nubs there prove, again, non-lifting. Now, there are also pitted middled bevel blocks, Andrew. Now, I'm sorry, this hallmark appears all over the world. Why would you have nub base stone blocks there if they were for lifting?
Agreed.
This is part of the original engineering and manufacture of the complex in Turkey. And you and I have seen pitted bevel blocks on your episodes and on mine as well. And it's great that we can move across to Turkey and have a look. Look at the configuration of these nubs. They're almost like a standardized nub on the bevel blocks.
Right. It's almost like an inversion of our normal bevels as well. Like we've mentioned that some of the pitted middles, that they're recessed away from the edges, and then right next to it though you have kind of like this one's almost in between the two. The middle sticks out, but it looks like it was supposed to be recessed more. Like the nub isn't fully exposed here. The bottom bevel line is there, matching the one on the left, but the middle
I
of this
completely
one.
agree, but if you look below, if you see the variant, it's
Oh
almost
yes,
like square.
that one especially. Yes.
Yeah, agreed, with a smoother block around it. Now, when we look at that square configuration, it adds to the fact that the nubs showed different variations, Andrew.
Agreed.
You've got bevel blocks with nubs, and there you've also got a block where it's got a square nub on the middle. We find that all over the world. We found examples in India as well, you and I, but Bolevi Mausoleum does show many hallmarks, Andrew.
And this actually is this whole fluted and sculpted area, and with the detail on it. Each section is one block, so the nub is attached to the whole bottom piece here. So it's not just the slender part, it's also incorporating the flowery decorative details as well. So you really, you have three different expressions, like on three different blocks. You have the kind of beveled standard blocks above, these fancy ornate blocks, and then you have the curious, half bevel or incised blocks below as well. Those have nubs on them.
Well, for people that don't know, I mean, Bolevi Mausoleum is in Turkey, and we find so many hallmarks in Turkey. I mean, within the area of Xanthos, you've got
agreed.
So, well, you know yourself from your last episode when you've looked at different boxes within Xanthos, and Turkey's not a small area. The engineers were there. They've showed creative skill, and Bolevi Mausoleum shows so many hallmarks, but look at the bottom here. On some of these boxes.
They are all different, aren't they? You have different profiles. The larger ones sit right in the middle. And then one that Ziggy pointed out, I didn't put this in my video. You go all the way down to the bottom, and there's one more right down here. So, yes, they're all over. They're peppered all over.
That to me, it's non-lifting, number one, because it's on the base stone.
Agreed.
And I will stretch out here, Andrew, and say these boxes had a reason. Were they containers for something? They were not just sarcophagi for the dead.
I don't think so.
You cannot write that off as that. Not a chance.
There's too many weird ones, and the ways you can get into them. Looks like people can force their ways into them, but also there's specific square holes. Like if I go back to my artifacts and go to sarcophagi and go to Turkey, then we can see that some of them actually had holes deliberately carved into them, not necessarily robbers breaking in. These are deliberate. Someone designed these holes for these boxes. So what other pieces are we missing? Is there fixtures and installations that go with this that we don't have today?
It's interesting. I mean, you've got the Lycian rock cut tombs, you've got places that were positioned in a very high sort of area. And look at those, Andrew, those nubs and that square that's taken out. It's not broken into. That was purposeful.
I think so.
That was purposeful. Now, they're not your standardized nubs.
Right.
They're completely different.
Yeah, one sticks
out.
Now,
we've looked at different theories through commenters that nubs were for lifting. Now, I wouldn't be wanting to lift that like that unless I had something enormous. Now, there are other areas in the world that show nubs, like China, for argument's sake, that show nubs that you will not be lifting. Now, Yangshan is a great area for that. The megaliths there are 38,500 ton. We're not talking about Baalbek trilithon stones of 1,400 metric ton. How on earth would we have moved that kind of megalithic stone? And if you look to the left of the image that you've brought up here, not what's left, what has gone. How on earth did they move and quarry that much stone? Now, I don't know what you're thinking, but I've searched everywhere for where that can be in China, and I can't find it. Have you got any ideas, Andrew?
Yes, agreed, Phil. I wanted to look at the missing material on the left, and the size of this block, and if there were other blocks this size that were quarried, where did they go? And so, this one definitely looks like it was in the progress of being taken out of the quarry. This was going to go somewhere, obviously. But then you look at other parts of Yangshan, like the overhang, for example, and this piece, while it does look like an obelisk, there are little altars underneath it. So if you were going to carve this out and remove it and use it somewhere, why would you take the time to carve little altars underneath it? They're going to get smashed when you take your obelisk out, or they're going to be in the way at the least. So why would they be there?
Well, the first thing I'd like to say on that, Andrew, is that the entire area was 38.5 thousand tons.
Mm-hmm.
That's not small, is it? No. Big massive thank you to Lynn Mitzi at the Lost History channel for pointing out under here.
Mm-hmm.
She sent me the image of these. We'd seen them already, but thank you, Lynn. Mm-hmm. And it does show on the middle megalith that basically, Andrew, we've got, well, look under there. Why would you leave those there, Andrew?
Mm-hmm. Right.
You simply wouldn't. They were functional at some point in time, or something was going on there. There's not the nubs that you find in the middle megalith, which is 16.8 thousand tons. Now, we've also looked at this before, you and I. The one thing that the nubs point out to me is you were not lifting that stone anywhere, Andrew. Not a chance. How big would the crane have had to have been?
And you can see the lifting points. If they were lifting points, the sloped lower profiles, any kind of rope and tackle is going to slide right off of these. Almost every nub has this shallow profile to the bottom of them that is just not conducive.
Yeah, I agree with that. And the mineralogy change at the bottom as well, the different parts of stone and the colours, it almost Petra-esque with the redness that you find there, but there's no way that was being lifted anywhere. Not a chance.
No. Yeah, you can see that they're not even necessarily uniform across the whole thing. You have lower ones and higher ones. They're not evenly spaced, different profiles. It doesn't speak to me as a technique for lifting here.
No. I pointed out as well on one of my videos that thanks to Dave Hannaran at Uchronia Utopia, that they could correlate maybe to the stars.
Mm-hmm.
He's fantastic with that, but it certainly isn't for lifting. They're not wood either. That is the same mineralogy as the stone that it was quarried from. And if you zoom into that there, you can almost see it's the same mineralogy, Andrew. Fantastic photo.
It's crumbling.
It's not,
it is crumbling away, but it's still there's no rings, concentric rings of wood underneath there. I'm not seeing that. This appears to be the same mineralogy as the bedrock that it's made from.
Absolutely agree. It's non-conducive with lifting either, or we'd be looking at a crane that, well, has never been manufactured today that would have lifted it. It's not going to happen. So it was left for a reason.
I agree. Yep. I think they are esoteric or symbolic. There's more than one meaning to them, more than one function to them. There's a lot more going on with them. I agree.
Yeah, absolutely. I think as well with the larger megalithic block that would have been moved, we've seen other examples of that as well, Andrew. Limit's variation. We've seen those as well in South America, and I'm sure that you will agree that if we're finding the same sort of quarried stone there and they were attempting the same thing in South America, then why would we find that in China and in South America?
Agreed. And like I'm saying, with this large, slender obelisk-sized piece, was it really intended to be completely removed, or was this as far as they were going with it? Like we said, there are little altars underneath. Now, if you've searched Peru a few times and maybe the Zone X region or some of these more out-of-the-way underground subterranean elements, you'll know that there are similar little altars, if you want to call them altars, underneath Cusco. Let's see if I can find one here. Where do we have it? Here you go. the same kind of altar. And it's, I'm not sure what this configuration was supposed to be. It's got a slanted roof, some weird geometric angles in odd places, but nonetheless, you have some kind of central bedrock monolithic altar that seems very reminiscent of the Yangshan example.
Well, the square cut to the right-hand side as well, it's very specific, isn't it?
Agreed.
That was very purposeful. It's not copper chisel, sticks and stones, Andrew, that purposefully did this. If it was, then I'd be very, very shocked. But it's pretty much similar to what we're seeing at Yangshan as well. Now, we've also seen in South America large versions of the Nubs, smaller variations of the Nubs, the standardized variations of the Nubs also. And, we have studied these for many, many, many years, and you get the pitted middles that you get at Bolevi that we've looked at prior, the different variations of Nubs, the inverted Nubs, the polygonal stonework. Now, to me, these are not for lifting. The blocks are too small, Andrew.
Yeah, you don't need to. And this a single nub, why not a pair like below? There's no missing nub here. This isn't broken off. It's pristine surface. If it breaks off, it looks something more like this over on the right. So
yeah, absolutely. The Coricancha nubs are very, very, very purposeful. Whether they've been moved or not remains to be seen. But the Coricancha are single ornate nubs, like that we've seen in India. Why would you have blocks above if they were for lifting? If the blocks below have got them, is that just not a signature of the builder or the engineer? As well, if you look underneath, you've almost got like it's blown out slightly, like a half inverted nub, a double nub as well to the left-hand side.
Yeah, that's how this one looks as well. It's like a blown out, not necessarily broken off. That almost looks like it's popped or exploded or blown out somehow.
If you could check the mineralogies of these stones and we could test the areas, would that prove maybe that power was used or magnetism or anything different than sandbags or wood? Because the mineralogies suggest to me that is not the case, and certainly not for lifting in these instances.
Agreed, yeah. And like this one, it has an odd little hole in it. What's going on there? And I think some of these other ones down here have little creases in them. Other nubs with holes we've seen in Turkey and some of those boxes. So yeah, there's lots of different little details going on here, and they are far too small and fragile, and on too small of a block to be just a lifting boss.
Absolutely agree. You can see as well the colour differential within the block. When you zoom in like that maybe the mineralogies were completely different. It's too easy to say geopolymer or stone softening or matter manipulation. We need a definitive way that these were made, because you and I have found so many sites that we're going to talk over the coming weeks of why these are not lifting bosses, wood, and why they were purposefully done by a specific set of engineers.
Agreed. Right here you can see why would they shift from one style, one expression to another. If they were for lifting, they certainly didn't need them for any of these blocks down here. So, and the beveling.
Absolutely agree.
Beveled edges.
You've almost got like a bevel edge to some of these blocks as well. And the bevel edge blocks that we looked at prior, Bolevi Mausoleum, we've got examples in South America that are very, very similar. I mean, look at that block there. It's almost got a nub at the bottom, and it was as if it was a bevel block. You could see the bevel line on there.
Agreed.
Now, why aren't all the blocks like that? If it was a standardized block segment that these engineers were going for, with their different time periods, different engineers, I don't think so. I personally don't think that was the case, but the fact that we find them all around the world does suggest that the same or a same sort of engineers produce these blocks everywhere. Why are we finding those in South America, Andrew, and in Turkey?
Agreed. Yeah, I mean, and you can see that it's the same color of stone, and the fitment is still the same across all these blocks. All that's really changed is the surface treatment, right? Even the size of the course arrangement, block to course, is still the same, but it's almost as though they've changed the setting on their tool, or they've shifted to a different surface treatment. But otherwise, everything else seems to be the same process.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, on bigger blocks in South America, Ollantay Tambo, for argument's sake,
Mm-hmm.
we could suggest that where they show their nubs, that we find the same set of 3 above the Mancuare pyramid door that we do. We've got the same sets in South America. Now, you and I can see here on this photograph that with the blown off nub at the top, the mineralogy is exactly the same in the middle as the stone itself. There is no way that that is for lifting, and there is certainly no way that that is, any different than the stone it was made from.
Somebody probably broke that off standing on it. These are not as robust as people think. They are very fragile. I mean, and some of these small shells, no way on that one. You're not going to lift anything by that.
Well, I think on the weight of the block, it isn't conducive to lifting these at all. These could have been for shadow play, maybe. They could have been for the specific engineers to see when they were walking through, because, these would have been internal to the structure, not external, when it was in its completion.
Right.
So who would have been seeing these nubs? Wouldn't have been everyone, Andrew,
Right. Yeah, the avenues and doorways and hallways seem to show them as though you're supposed to read them as you walk down the hallway.
I mean, if you look at the base stone there,
yeah.
Why on earth would you lift a base stone block? You wouldn't need them there, Andrew.
Right.
And I mean, what fascinates me is that the top, sort of just above where you've gone there, you've got an inverted nub. We'll show examples of these, in future episodes. An inverted nub, now, can't be wood, has to be part of the original stone.
I agree.
Has to be part of the original stone. Now, you wouldn't lift from that, would you?
Absolutely.
Why would you have an external and an inverted nub on specific blocks like that unless they were intentional?
Right, side by side. So, I mean, magnetism again, there might be something to that, a positive and negative. Inverted is internal, and the normal expression is more of an external, maybe the positive. Who knows how they're created, right? But we have to update our vocabulary and our terminology for these things, because there's more to it than just nub or not a nub. There's many different subcategories and classifications for nubs.
Absolutely agree. The variations of the nubs are vital, Andrew. Absolutely vital. Why have them on a very small block and not on a huge block that's next to it? And if you look up to the right there, you've got, larger nubs. You've got smaller nubs, and then the blocks next to them, none. So if they were for lifting, it's not conducive to that. They are the same mineralogy which we keep banging on about.
Right.
I know we're missing quite a lot of the picture, but they are also internal. They're internal. So
and we can
who
go
are they
back,
meant for?
We can go back to our Giza Khufu pyramid and look at the portcullis nub in high detail. You can see Larry. You can see his finger size relation of the nub, very shallow. You can't really get a rope or tackle to get good purchase under.
It wasn't for lifting, was it?
No.
And the mineralogy is the same as the stone, and also this, which you and I describe as a functional nub, which is within the Great Pyramid. Now, why would you have that nub there other than to show that the engineers were there? Now, that suggests to me that they were some of the first engineers to have the workings within the pyramids.
I agree. The nubs are foundational to their technique and their method.
Absolutely. And anybody that says that that isn't possible, you're looking at an image there that proves that you're wrong.
Agreed. Okay, so we were talking about the nubs on the wall at Ollantaytambo and the different profiles. Just bringing up again that at Cusco, the Coricancha, same area, we have these same variations in nub shape and size. Some stick out very far, some are shallow, some are square, some have this more rounded profile. One of these, I love this photo. This photo shows some of the edge beveling that we were talking about, like this middle block has the beveled edges on both sides. I like that one.
Agreed. It also shows as well that these are not for lifting. It almost has like a polygonal feel to it, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Like they were showing us the pitted techniques that we've seen at Bolevi Mausoleum, and also the fact that you've got a double nub block that would not be for lifting in this instance. If you look underneath that one as well, you've got almost what I call, and yourself as well, a standardized nub shape, which is circular across the top.
Right.
I mean, we've both looked at whether maybe shadow play when this was actually in its entirety could have come into play. You can see the shadows here may be conducive to that. Could be true, but it's the bevel edging that proves the South American engineers must have had the same knowledge as what the Turkish engineers have.
Agreed. And we can go over to Athens at the Acropolis, and I can bring up one of our favorite photos, and we can see a clear parallel. We'll zoom right in right away. Beveled edge block with nubs on it. So right at the top, you see the beveled edge, and these nubs are part of these blocks, and they go around the square holes. So if these were architectural installations in these holes, they have to accommodate and go around some of these nubs. Even this one on the corner.
A lot of people say to me when they've looked at this photo that the nubs are identical. You can see by the zoomed in version here that that's absolutely not the case. The depth of the nubs and also the fact they don't appear on every block does not show these are standardized at all. Now, you can see mineralogy differences, differences within the nub on the block itself, squared nubs, nubs that show that these were not for climbing. They're not wood. They're exactly the same mineralogy. Probably one of the best photos we've ever seen. Don't you agree, Andrew?
Agreed. And you could even go down to the bottom and see how, they're down at the bottom. So if you're going to lift, you don't need to lift very far. They're at the bottom, very bottom. And then a block right next to it. This block is pristine. It does not have any nubs on it. The one beyond maybe has a couple, there's foreground rubble, obscuring it. But this block definitely has 0 nubs on it. So this block was able to be placed without the need for nubs.
I mean, you can look at that block as well at the bottom with none on, and just around the edge, it's almost like it's got a beveled edge. I mean, we'll look at this in a next episode, but it reminds me of Jerusalem somewhat, the Wailing Wall, where those foundation stones have got a beveled edge. Now, why would we see beveled edge nub blocks in South America, Turkey and Greece if the engineers were not together, Andrew?
Agreed. Yeah, it's not a regional. I mean, there are regional variations to these nubs and the course arrangement, block size. Of course, there's difference in rock types as well, but there is a thread that connects them all, and that is the same architectural principles.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I mean, we've got some really good photos of these walls. Some of them, yes, we will say they do look pretty uniform and standardized at first glance. They are pretty much all centered on the blocks. They kind of form a grid pattern. But then you can also see other examples where there is more variation than meets the eye at first glance. So here, for example, you have large square and rectangular nubs, small rounded lozenge nubs, our traditional, our main shape again, this repeating shape like we just saw, this sideways capital D. So right across.
I mean, that reminds me straight away of Bolevi Mausoleum in Turkey. If you look at the pattern at the bottom, also the bevel edge, the fact that there are times one nub that's standardized with the circular top, the pitted middles, the times two as well.
Mm-hmm.
Look at that bevel edge there.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, why would you have that bevel edge? Almost like there's a little mini square in the middle of it.
I see that.
That shows some sort of fixture.
Other
Do
ones
you see
well.
that?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, these are not identical nubs. They are variants of a specific engineering content, Andrew.
Agreed. And you can see this, like we just said at Bolevi, this lower block is a half bevel or an incised design, and these curved flowery detail pieces with these little raised bits at the seams. These, I mean, we'll cut back here and we'll go back over to Bolevi. It's the exact same.
It's exactly the same engineers that did that.
Where are we here? Bolevi Mausoleum. Oh dear. And
you have a few variations in that folder, my friend.
I mean, it's the exact same. This lipped edge or extra material at the seams, the same kind of decorative details, and then we'll go to a more zoomed out photo, and we will show, yeah, these same half beveled or incised blocks, just like at Athens, identical, with nubs on as well.
Yeah, absolutely. It also shows the standardized half circular nub. It shows base stone nubs, Andrew, that prove it isn't for lifting. It's almost like that they could at will produce the pitted middle bevel edged nub blocks, and also these more ornate singular blocks at will. They didn't have to do this. They've shown at Athens and at Bolevi and at other sites like South America, Ollantay, Tambo. They didn't have to do this. So what it produced, they were showing us something.
And right here next door to the Bolevi Mausoleum is the Bolevi Tumulus, and you can see here that they didn't need any nubs for these blocks. These are huge blocks the size of buses, and it has that very unique puffy exterior, this rounded swelling surface like we see at Preen and a few other places in Turkey. It's very specific. Only certain sites had this treatment done to their blocks.
Yeah, absolutely agree. It's almost like that it oozed out of it, or growth of stone springs to mind on that, as it was kind of meant to be that way, that they wanted it to be that way. If they did and they needed to produce nubs, why aren't they on every block?
I agree. It's almost like a loaf of bread rising, the way it swells out and oozes together.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's a very good site to look at. You can see one of those articles from the Russian researchers. I don't have the photos saved. I have some photos that show the precision of these pieces, but there are other photos that show the tumulus, that those puffy blocks, the joints on them aren't all real. Some of those joints are only simulated. So those blocks, as big as they look, are in reality twice as big, maybe even bigger.
It'd be interesting to know what actually happened at the Bolevi Mausoleum. We've heard some stories, Andrew, that it was a tomb. Why would you produce bevel-edged, nubbed, pitted blocks with the ornate underneath on such a large location for a tomb? We hear the word tomb spread around a lot. Now, I'd like us to go back to the Lycian rock-cut tombs and the Lycian boxes in Turkey. I think personally we can find some examples there of nubs that prove exactly what we're saying, Andrew. And you know, you've done an episode on it recently, which was fantastic, by the way. You've had some fantastic comments on that. Now, there was a set of internal nubs in Turkey, which you don't see very often. I mean, me and you have studied boxes, sarcophagi boxes, if you like, that people will understand. And why would you have internal nubs within a box?
Agreed.
That
Right.
would just not be relevant to the box if it was for lifting, if it was the mineralogy of the stone, if it was wood. It just wouldn't stand to reason. What are your thoughts on the fact that we find boxes around the world, i.e. sarcophagi or whatever people would like to suggest that they are, that have internal nubs within the structure?
And see, we are just now noticing those. I mean, how many photographers have even thought to take a photo from the inside I mean, we need more angles and more documentation of the internals of these boxes. There could be more instances of this. As far as I know, that turkey box is the only one that I've ever seen that has.
Yeah, likewise as well. Congratulations to Dave
Agreed.
Hannaran for giving us that photo and finding it. It just one of the best examples that we've seen. I mean, here you can see on the photo that you've got up now, look at the windows at the top, the ×3 variation of the windows that we find that everywhere, don't we? It almost leads to sort of where you've got that at Petra, we've got that in Turkey, we've got, these rock cut tombs do not suggest to me that they were tombs, Andrew. They've got nub fixtures, very ornate work done to the exteriors, and the nubs on the outside just don't suggest to me that they were for lifting, because it's bedrock, Andrew.
Absolutely. Now these could be decorative. These ends, they are simulated wood. It is made to look like beams, but that's not saying that they were beams. I mean, you're going to have to imply that the entire bedrock is concrete or was covered over at that point. So how far are we willing to take the geopolymer concrete theory when you have things like this that are clearly part of the mountain, still part of the earth? So how...
Well, when it comes to bedrock examples, Andrew, we've got South American examples that just are not conducive to lifting. They're not conducive to being wood. They are underneath in the bedrock itself. Why would there be a nub there? Is it an engineering feature that shows that the engineers were in that area and travelled worldwide? Personally, I think that it is. The bedrock nubs are impossible to replicate and say that they were for lifting. You're not lifting bedrock. The hitching post to the sun.
We'll go back. Here you go.
There you go. Why would that be produced for lifting?
Right.
Wouldn't.
This is part of the mountain. This is supposedly the very top of the mountain. So where were they going to take it anyway? It's already at the top. You just need to push it down to wherever it's going to go, if it's going anywhere.
Yeah, absolutely agree. I mean, that is not for lifting. It's not wood. I think we can categorically say after our first episodes that we found examples that prove nubs are not for lifting. Nubs are not standardized. They are variant, and there are different variations of them across the world. We've also seen that the engineers could perform different versions of them, i.e. bevel-edged nubbed blocks. I mean, look at that. ×4 configuration. Certainly not wood.
And it's square on top versus round on the bottom. So we have two different shapes right here.
Yeah, absolutely. And whether that was a quarry site or not, those nubs were left for a specific reason. Now, why? And you certainly wasn't lifting the mountain now, was you? And if you were, you wouldn't put in rope underneath that to lift them, was you?
No. If anything, I would say hanging something maybe by them.
Yeah.
Pisac as well has those. But no, I can't see anything being lifted. These, again, with the sloped lower profile, it's going to slide right off.
It's going to slide right off. We saw that at Yangshan as well on the larger middle megalith, the 16,000 ton one plus. It just isn't conducive for lifting on anything. I mean, the mineralogy actually intrigues me here. Were they placing something on top of it, and was it heated? That would be intriguing to find out if we could take mineralogy samples from specific nub sites around the world where we see colour changes and so on.
Agreed.
And then we could,
There's staining of some kind. You can clearly see there's something going on.
It's almost like a square, isn't it, of yellow in the middle there.
Right.
Around the ×4 nub configuration, as if something was set over the top of it, Andrew.
Agreed. Something. An installation of some kind.
Yeah, I agree.
Well, we're getting close to the end of time, Phil. What would you like to say to the audience today?
I think that we've looked at different variations of nubs, different areas within the world that prove engineers were worldwide on our phenomenon, Andrew. Now, I think that in the next episode we can prove that by showing more examples of base stones in India. What do you think?
Agreed.
In India, especially, I think would make a fantastic episode because we've looked at so many different sites there, Andrew. Also, I'd like to give a huge shout out to some of the bigger channels that we've looked up to over our time. Ben at Uncharted X and Jimmy, a bright insight over in Egypt at the moment, who did a huge favour by looking at Nubs for us.
Yes.
I need to go to the Serapeum and GCF one, but thank you guys for your hard work.
Yes.
I'd also like to do a big shout out to Dave Bubcat as well.
Yes.
His channel is absolutely fantastic. If any of you haven't gone over and looked at the Stonewall research, then go and look at his Giants research. It's second to none.
Agreed.
I'd like to say a huge, huge thank you to the team that you and I work with, Andrew. Without them and their hard work, Dave at Ukrainian Utopia, I research with Josh as well. Thank you, Dave and Josh. Our team with Ziggy, Dan, with Guy, one of our new members, Rob Heatherly. Thank you, Rob, for all that you do. Shermanator, what would we do without you, with checking every single block that we look at as well. And, you know, we are so happy to have all of you with us over there on Twitter. Yes. If you'd like to come over to Twitter and look at Andrew, Ancient History Criticisms, and myself at the Ancient Alternative View, we're happy to answer any questions that you may have. Any shout outs from you, Andrew?
I think you pretty much covered them all. I'll say thanks to Chris over at Stone Nub Language and some of the other Twitter accounts that we don't have in our group, but they are still part of our community. We're getting a lot of good satellite views and new people coming into the community. It's really nice to see. And good luck to Jimmy and Ben over there in Egypt, and I can't wait to see what they're going to bring back for us.
Yeah, and I look forward to doing our next show. And if there's anything, any of you out there with reference to the physical evidence, the hallmarks, especially with the Nubs, that Andrew and I have studied for years, want to hear about sites like Sagasta, the Baystones there, India, which we're going to look at next. Any of you want to come on our show? Let's hear from you. And thank you very much indeed for watching. We really appreciate it. Another massive shout out to Michael at the Lost History channel.
Michael.
And thank you for all your help and being so patient with me over the time that I've struggled. So cheers, mate. And I'll speak to you very soon. And thanks very much, Andrew, for working with me. It's been an honour for the last 4 or 5 years that we've been in the comments and risen to where we are now. So cheers, mate. Yes. And it's been a pleasure. I look forward to our next show.
Yes, hopefully we'll get some more topics from our audience and we can do more of these free-form discussions, or we can focus on specific things. So I'm really excited to see where this goes in the future, but hopefully we'll make this a pretty regular thing. So thank you guys for hanging out with us, and we'll talk to you next time.